In his first month as the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump has declared the media the enemy of the people. Why? The First Amendment of the Constitution provides for a free press to be the watchdog on government. With most of Mr. Trump's four-year term still ahead of us, how should journalists respond? Is the harsh criticism part of a new style of presidential strategy? When Trump slams trusted news outlets as garbage and fake news, what should the public make of it? Why should you care? From the campus of San Jose State University, welcome to a special edition of Equal Time. I'm your host, Bob Rucker, journalism professor and former CNN correspondent in San Francisco. Here on the news desk are a group of respected men and women who have devoted their lives to the field of journalism and have unique insights to help us understand this very high-profile fight. Let's meet our guests.
I'm Rebecca Perayo, and I am the former executive editor of San Jose State's Spartan Daily.
I'm Joe Rodriguez, a former columnist and reporter at the San Jose Mercury News, and I teach journalism now here at San Jose State.
Chris Callahan, Dean of the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University, and a former political reporter in Washington for the Associated Press.
Well, we're happy to have you with us, as well as our faculty and students. And let me start with a little history lesson. I'm a little old enough, I'm gray in the tooth. I can remember a president named Richard Nixon who had trouble with the media. He had a hit list from what I remember, but I never remember seeing him go so publicly with his attacks. So Chris, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts about this new style of president?
Well, it's certainly unprecedented on so many different levels. It's hard to know exactly where to start. But I will say, and I was struck by this, I was with Bob Schieffer right before the election. Bob, of course, the former CBS News Washington correspondent, still there, but former host of Face the Nation, and a great observer of the Washington political press scene for decades. And somebody in the group asked Bob, who was the worst president? Who was the worst president in terms of the relationship between the government and the press? And he said, without missing a beat, whoever the current one is. And Bob's point was there's been a continuum. Right. And literally the relationships, as, quite frankly, administrations get more sophisticated in how to control the news, and one will learn, just much like in the military, right? You learn from one war to another. Well, you learn from one campaign to another, and the tactics and strategies that are deployed for media relations get more and more sophisticated over time. So the fact that the current president is, as Bob would say, the worst in terms of these press-government relationship is no surprise. The difference here is the rhetoric,
exactly.
Clearly.
And it strikes me, Joe, that he is doing this on purpose. But how does it come across to the professional media?
Well, right now I'm wishing I had a degree in political psychology. I don't know if he's doing this on purpose or if it's just him, his psyche. And as we see in most of his press releases, the press corps there in the room is flabbergasted by his answers. I mean, they're just amazed that a president would behave in that manner, use the word he's using, telling reporters to shut up and sit down, and ask me nice questions, safe questions. That's not our job. Our job is to ask tough questions. What I fear is that at least the Washington press corps might get caught up in the coverage of the Trump cult personality, and they're already waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to cover his tweets. That's not the sort of journalism people need.
It's strange. We have never seen anything like that.
Yeah. So I think at some point editors are going to have to decide, just how much do we follow the circus and start looking behind the curtain.
And doing it thoroughly and persistently. Rebecca, you're a new person to the field. Welcome to journalism. You've led our student newspaper very well for a while. Now, what do you think about looking at the field and this kind of person to cover?
I mean, at first I was a little intimidated, but it's exciting to be able to report on him because he gets very angry, and it just kind of brings the kind of person he is to light. Because it's not that people are reporting on fake news, as he says, but they're reporting on truth, and it's kind of an ugly truth about him, and he doesn't like it. So I think I'm going to be graduating this year and going out into the field, so it's going to be interesting to see how these next 4 years, I mean, if he stays for 4 years, how they unfold and being able to report on it. I mean, even being the editor for election night was really exciting because you got to capture how people felt about him and just see how everything unfolded. So I guess going into it, it's challenging, but it's an exciting challenge.
And it's necessary.
Yeah.
The public needs to know the truth. And so let's get into this fake news nonsense. It drives me crazy, Chris. I don't know about you, but and I'll open this up to everybody. It drives me crazy that we're now blended together either on Facebook or some other social media as the truth that we've been getting historically, and now the new truth that sounds sensational and fun. How do we help the public know the difference?
Well, I mean, it's a great challenge, but it's interesting. Sort of why is this happening? And obviously, the president is driving a lot of it, and you have to ask yourself: does he really just hate us this much? I mean, what's the reason? I think the reason is very, very simple. It works. It works. What he's been doing works, very much so. The question is it going to work in the long term? So we're a month in. You're starting to see pieces of this sort of falling apart when you have a highly respected Republican senator coming out and saying in a wonderful interview on Sunday, where John McCain said to the interviewer, "I don't like you. I don't like reporters. I don't like journalists. I don't like journalism. But it's essential."
Exactly.
And everybody needs to understand that it's absolutely essential to our democracy. And that famous Thomas Jefferson quote, where given a choice, he would prefer newspapers without government versus government without newspapers. That is, that I think holds true today, and that was what McCain and others have been trying to say. So we'll see. Yes, it's playing really well now. Well, I'm not sure if it's playing really well, but it's playing to some constituency. We'll see how long that lasts.
And do you think, Joe, that the public out there really cares if we bellyache about this issue with the president?
I think that we still have a lot of readers and viewers, educated people, who care about the news. They're getting it from different avenues, but they're out there. The eyeballs are out there. I think people care. I think a great number of people are also confused about real fake news and fake news. You have the president calling, the New York Times and CNN fake news. At the same time, you have, charlatans on social media creating fake news that's actually made up. And so there's a large degree of confusion out there. I think newspapers and broadcasters will have to maybe create a new beat to cover, and that's separating real fake news from what the president calls from the truth.
Kind of like we do with restaurants. You
Right.
have these that you definitely want to gravitate to, and you might want to stay away from those.
Yeah.
Will the public do that, do you think, Rebecca? I mean, young people, we're trying to get young people to keep up with current events. Up until last year, I had a hard time as a professor to get students in journalism to keep up with current events. Now you're all talking about politics. Why?
I mean, because it's something that's affecting us, and I think that this election specifically affected a lot of us. And I guess it's important to keep up with news now because it's what's affecting our daily lives. And I guess it's important to keep up with it because it's a record of history, essentially. And you want to keep up with this and be able to tell the future generations of how this unfolded. Because I'm telling you, in the future when I have kids or grandkids and they're reading about this in their history classes, they're going to ask, what was it like? What was it really like? What was going on? And I want to be able to tell it factually, and I'm pretty sure my peers want to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's a very exciting and important time that we're living in right now, so it's important to keep up with it and to understand what's happening, not just see big headlines and follow that, but to really understand what's going on and why it's going on.
I'll never forget the day we came into this building to do our work to teach journalism, advertising, and PR. Mm-hmm. After the election, and there were students crying. And when I walked up to them and said, "What's the matter? Is something happening on campus?" They says, "No, I'm worried about being deported." I'm worried that this new president is going to come after my family. Did you experience that down in Arizona?
Very much so. So that I was there late that night with the students covering the election, and came in fairly early the next morning. I went to our First Amendment Forum, which is sort of our school's living room, if you will, and it's a good place to get a pulse of the student body. And I was there for about 30 seconds before I decided we needed to do something that night in real time.
Exactly.
So we put together a terrific panel, literally 24 hours, less than 24 hours since the election had been called, and had a very robust conversation of, quite frankly, what went wrong in terms of the coverage. I mean, forget, I'm not talking about ideology and who your preferred candidate is, but we blew it, right? Everybody thought that the other candidate was going to win. So what did the press as an institution do wrong? And we had this conversation, and I thought it was tremendously helpful for the students, Bob, because it took that energy, that nervousness, and I think made them very much realize, to Rebecca's point, that you have a role here. And in fact, your role today is more important than yesterday. And now more than ever, being a journalist is important. And it's it's a calling for many of us, and I think that's very much true. And I think if nothing else, what happened that night underscored the great need for young people like Rebecca to become the next generation of great journalists.
And now people all over the valley here are talking about Mr. Trump almost every day, and that wasn't happening in a very liberal environment like the Bay Area. So Joe, when you work for the Mercury News, if you were covering this story now, you mentioned the other day to me that we need more reporters digging for facts, tying it into the issues that people care about. But we have a business model in our profession now that says, well, no, we can't have that many reporters, we can't have that many photographers, we have to streamline. Is that going to hurt our efforts?
I think so. My greatest worry with the rise of Trump journalistically is that medium-sized papers like the Mercury News and small papers do not have enough bodies in the newsroom to follow, as I call it, the circus in Washington, and what develops from the Republican, his program and the congressional program in their communities. It's easy to cover, the guy who's setting off the fireworks.
Right.
It's much harder. You have to be more sophisticated to follow the results of those programs locally. We're looking at 4 years, unless he's impeached for something or other, but 4 years and possibly 8 years of Trump. And I don't think he's going to stop, getting up in the morning and saying outlandish things and changing his mind, a week later. This is going to go on and on and on.
That sounds like it's going to be exhausting.
Yes.
You really think we're going to be able to handle 8 years of that?
No, I probably won't. I don't know about you. No, I'll be around. But yeah, we have to as journalists decide how much do we pay attention to what he says. It's tempting. He's so outlandish. I mean, the quotes twice a day, headline quotes. When do we stop doing that? And I'm reminded of the columnist Molly Ivins, who said, what a politician says doesn't matter that much. Just follow the record. Follow what he or she does. And I think that's what we're going to have to do when we all get tired of the noise. We're going to know where's the substance. Let's go look for that. I think we have to do that with the limited amount of reporters that we have left in journalism.
And then, Rebecca, we heard stories about incidents taking place in Atlanta and Bowling Green that never happened. And Sweden is saying, we didn't have a problem either. Why is Mr. Trump talking about it? Does the younger generation of college students and young people in the Bay Area, do they understand those nuances? Do they even look for those facts, that the president is putting stuff out there that's not true?
I mean, I think college students do, just because, at least in the environment that I've been surrounded by, a lot of people don't believe him. So I think a lot of people believe that what he's saying isn't always as factual, just because we go and we look for it, because a lot of the things that he claims happens are horrifying. So, I mean, as a student and growing, I still have to deal with this stuff every day. I think it's important to realize that some things that he claims are true are not true. And again, it's scary because if he makes up fake facts or fake stories himself, he himself is fake news, I guess you could say, then what else could he be lying about, essentially, or making up, essentially? So I think it's important to tackle what is true and what is false of what comes out of his mouth, just so you're not blind throughout his term.
Someone asked me the other day, if you can prove he's not telling the truth, why don't journalists just call him a liar? Can we call the President of the United States a liar?
I think you can call statements. Well, I think it depends, and I think, and you asked me something the other day about what would Walter Cronkite. What would Walter think of all this? And I know what Walter would think of all this. He would say, and he would give advice to all of us to say, double down on what we do, which is, don't worry about the characterizations. Don't worry about a personal fight or hurt feelings. Double down on the facts, digging down on those stories. And journalism, Bobby, and you know this, I mean, journalism is a long game. Right. And the constant, it's not today's story, it's the stories over time. You look at the Vietnam War. Right. The Vietnam War, right, at the end, everybody remembers a very unpopular war. That was not the case. True. When it first started. Time, yeah. And that was largely a process of constant reporting, fact-based, in-depth reporting by courageous journalists who uncovered and shed a light on what that war was all about. And I'm not making an analogy to the Trump administration of Vietnam War, but the point is fact-based, aggressive, to Joe's point, very aggressive, in-depth, and constant. We don't give up. And we don't, and to my mind, we don't worry about getting into personal. It's not personal. Right. It's our job. It's our job. And on the best day, people don't like journalists. On the best day. Right.
And we're used to that.
We're used to that. We're the bearer of bad news. Right? And that's always been the case. It'll always be the case. And one of the interesting reactions to President Trump that I've seen is actually people who I've never heard from before standing up for journalists and writing about the importance of journalism and, in fact, funding. If you look at for a lot of the nonprofit news organizations, funding is up dramatically. Exactly. I'm not suggesting this is a good way to do that, but it's certainly a byproduct.
Exactly. Yeah. And for people out there at home who are watching and thinking, you smug journalists, come on, you don't. That criticism gets to us. We don't like to be called out at a press conference. Who wants to be in the White House, the East Room of the White House, and being dressed down by the President of the United States? Don't we feel that as journalists?
Oh, well, if it were me, I'd consider it a badge of honor to be called out by a president. As the dean said, we have to be aggressive. We know that people, half the populace, are going to be angry at you because you said something bad about their politician, and the others will cheer. And it's going to be changing like that. I don't think we should be too worried about being liked, although I do worry about being believed in, and respected. Mm-hmm. And so we do have our reputations to maintain. How we do that depends on how we cover his administration.
And now let's back up for a quick second. Historically, when the president spoke, people would listen and tend to believe first and not question unless we thought it was suspicious. The paradigm seems to be changing now. We start to suspect, well, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that's not true. And then the public might think to itself, well, if we're questioning him and we don't know about you guys, we have to do more work. You guys as young people have to get us involved. It seems like there's now a democracy where we have to do more to understand more. Is that right?
I think so, just because when you hear a president speak, someone that the, majority of the country has elected, you want to believe in them and you want to believe what they're saying. So we do have to do more work to really understand it and to get the truth out, because you're representing a country. So you don't want the majority of this country to question what a president is saying or not understand what a president is saying. So as journalists, it's important to understand what he's saying, to keep not questioning him, but to keep pulling more facts out of him, to keep pulling more information out of him, so we can put that out to the public and help interpret it for the rest of Americans.
Very good. When I left CNN to go into teaching first at University of Illinois and now here at San Jose State, I started to use a quote that I grew up with in my home state of Illinois. It was based on something that President Lincoln apparently once said, and I think it applies to journalists. Lincoln reportedly said, quote, "Before you shoot off your mouth, make sure your brains are loaded." End of quote. Now, he was talking to politicians, but I think that applies to us as well. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do we get people to get that brain-loaded concept as a priority?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think, I do think of this as a long game. We're in the case of the new administration, we're a month in. The reporting that I've seen coming out of Washington, not all of it, but a lot of it, outstanding. Exactly the kind of reporting that Joe was talking about. In depth, aggressive, as Senator McCain said on Sunday. Part of this relationship is sort of by definition adversarial. That's okay. It needs to be, should be. So and it's very easy for any politician, no matter who it is, who is just new in office, when they really haven't governed. Governing's hard.
Right.
Getting things done is actually really hard. And rhetoric is easy and cheap. So I think the measure is not where are we today, a month in, but where are we 6 months from now? Where are we 12 months from now? And in the case of the press, how does the public view us? And is this sort of rhetoric that we're hearing out of the White House remaining? I'm not convinced.
I'm not convinced either. Yeah. And I must say, when I see a colleague like mine at CNN, Jim Acosta, being kind of dressed down by Donald Trump, my first instinct is to get angry, because years ago when he was opening up his first casino in Atlantic City, I actually covered that for a station in Philadelphia. And I remember meeting the guy, and I must tell you, the guy that I met, that I interviewed, that I had a few minutes to talk to, is the exact same guy I see on television today. So when I see Jim Acosta or somebody from a network really working hard to get the American people what they need to know to help make decisions, to get dressed down like that, it's troubling to our profession. But it's not debilitating to our profession, correct?
Right. Getting back to how do you respond to him, there are journalists who are calling him a liar. Unfortunately, they're opinion columnists who are buried in the back of newspapers. They have disappeared. The editorial commentator for broadcast news has disappeared. I remember growing up, there was a 2-minute spot at the end of the local newscast for an editorialist who expounded on, the politics of Los Angeles or whatever. Let's bring those guys back, and women. And this is probably going a little bit too far for most traditional newspaper people, but I would put editorials and some columns on page 1 when you feel strongly enough about responding to this president.
And it may have a business model incentive. It might actually get people to buy the paper and to sign up for subscriptions. When you hear things like that, we're getting feisty now in journalism again. That's a good thing, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I like what you were saying about how you want to get this, you want to have these opinion articles on the front, just because those are your peers. Those are the people around you. You're not just, you can have news, and then you can hear what people are saying about that and how they feel about that. So I think I think it's really important that we get feisty about it. And, we get personal about it because that's what you're representing. You're representing people. So it's really important to really dig deep and to see what people are saying and to start a conversation.
And very quickly, because we're about to run out of time, when the president wants to harken back to the election numbers and my electoral number was higher than hers and the best ever and all that, should we try to shut him down politely and get back to what we need to talk about, or do we just let him do it?
Well, it depends on the venue. And he likes these settings. I mean, and this is the irony of all this. This is the president who hates the media more than any president. I completely disagree with that.
Yeah, I disagree too.
Loves the media. Loves it. Deals with us all the time. For his own purposes.
Right.
But this is somebody who is, if anything, is so intently focused on what our colleagues are writing about in broadcasting, maybe to the detriment of actually doing the job.
And that's what it makes me think of Nixon, because he worried a lot about what we reported and what we did. Yeah. I do think we have to be careful with a president who simply shows us, this is the way I want it to be. I'm going to work at controlling you, or at least having an effect on you. but we still have that noble calling. When I teach journalism, I always say, the Constitution provided for our career. The least we can do is rise to the occasion. That's a challenge, but you teach journalism now. It's a fun challenge, isn't it?
It is, and I think the way to deal with some of his outlandish claims is to give reporters more leeway, a license to interpret the news more than we have in the past, where Trump says he actually won the popular vote. He said that weeks ago. I think reporters should be free to just say this is a charge he made months ago. He hasn't provided any evidence
to say that and then move on.
Yes, give reporters more power of interpretation.
But don't you think news organizations have done a pretty good job of that? I mean, when factual things that are factual and measurable come up that are clearly wrong, coming back and saying incorrect.
Yeah,
Incorrect.
I think that's the case with political analysis, but now I think we're going to need it in daily reporting out of Washington and across the country.
And we have to respect the needs of the people.
Right.
That's the most important thing, and I'm getting the cue. We've got to wrap. Listen, I enjoyed this. You come back and visit us anytime.
Thank
We're
you.
glad to have you
Pleasure.
on. Thank you for joining us. We're going to continue these dialogues with a series called Engage, coming from the School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Please watch for that. We thank you for joining us. Come back again for another edition of Equal Time.